Hey everybody, it's Mia with TMBH. Today's March 21st and it's Wednesday, so it's Wellness Wednesday. Sometimes I get confused with the days, you know? Sometimes Wednesdays feel like Thursdays or Fridays, or sometimes they feel like Mondays, which is really not good. That's like the worst. But today is Wednesday and it feels like a Wednesday. So we're gonna talk about today I think addiction in general would maybe be like a good way to describe what we're gonna talk about. And kind of like the brain and how I think sometimes a lot of people, and I've said this before, but a lot of people feel like addiction is like treatable or like beatable with sheer willpower. Like you look at people who are like addicted and you're like, make better choices. Like don't do that. Obviously all you need to do is when you see a drug, don't do it. But like, it's not that simple. Like that's not how it works. And you can kind of tell, like people who say things like that, I feel like either like you've never met an addict, you've never been an addict, or like never researched anything about addiction to feel that kind of way. Because Dr. B said, and like it was stuck with me from the first time that she said it, like it was like a really, like she said, addiction is a fundamental yet treatable disease of the brain. And like it's a really simple way to put it, but I love that she put it that way because it's really important to understand addiction really is, it's a disease, you know, it's an illness, and you never beat an illness through sheer willpower. Like you would not tell somebody with diabetes or cancer, like all you have to do is not want it and then you're not gonna have it. Like it doesn't work that way. I would say that diabetes is probably a bit of a better example just because with diabetes, like people know that you can control it by like not eating certain foods or whatever. But actually, while that can be the case in or like the early stages of diabetes, like if you change your diet, then you'll no longer have diabetes. In certain cases, after a while, it will get to the point where really changing your diet, it can make things better, but it won't actually stop you from having diabetes, right? And so you have to think about addiction that way. That's great advice, like don't do it is great advice for people who haven't actually initiated drug use yet, right? And even then, a lot of people, like before they initiate drug use, that might not even be enough. Honestly, if you see somebody who's struggling to the point where they're considering using drugs or in an environment where it seems like they're getting closer and closer to the point where they might start, you instead of just saying don't do it, you also want to figure out other ways to help them with the issues that are leading them to want to use. So for example, asking them to maybe seek some treatment, therapy. I'd actually seen, like, rarely do you go on MTV and find something useful. But I was watching the show called Siesta Key, and this guy was having this conversation with his female friend, and she had kind of been displaying some very aggressive behavior with her other friends. Like, she would be getting into these really horrible arguments over things that were just kind of, like, not anything worth arguing over, and at one point they got violent, the argument. So the male friend was talking to her, and they're like joking around, and she said something, she goes, oh my goodness, you're not my therapist, and they're joking, and then he turns it around and he goes, no, I'm not your therapist, but I think you should see one. And I thought like, wow, that honestly is kind of like, you have to, maybe you don't always know when the right time to say something is, but he took a moment where they were joking about something and he found a way where he could maybe kind of introduce that subject matter, and then he started to develop it into a more serious conversation. So that I think is like a really good example of how you can start that conversation with somebody without it having to be like, hey, come over to my place, we have to talk about something serious, you know? It's like, you know, he just found a moment to like maybe bring up something that he had been feeling about his friend needing treatment. So anyway, back to addiction being a disease. The word addiction actually, and I learned this today, comes from a Latin term that means to be enslaved by. And I think that that's a really interesting fact because it really is kind of like that. You know, your brain controls so much of who you are, from the way that you think and the way that you feel and how you process information. Like everything that you know about you and that kind of makes you you. You know, like like if you were like a company, I guess, like your brain is the what, like the headquarters, the corporate headquarters, right? And so when things aren't going right with your brain, when you introduce drugs, which are a chemical, and they can actually cause differences in the chemical balances that are already in your brain, they can mess with the neurons in your brain and the transmitters in your brain, it rewires the structure of your brain. So imagine having a company that's all of a sudden, like you have like you have a CEO and you have all these other people that work for your corporation, and then all of a sudden things change up and you have a new CEO and you have new people who are working there and you have a new mission statement, like all these new things are coming up, right? Then that can completely change how the company functions. And it's the same thing with your brain. When you introduce drugs into your brain, all of a sudden you've got all of these different shifts that are happening. Your brain literally does change. And now you as a person will change. And so that's why I think it can be particularly difficult for people who aren't the addicted person, but the person who is like relating to the addicted person. So like maybe the family members, the friends, coworkers, etc. It can be difficult because they literally say, who are you? You're not the same. But the truth is that person is literally not the same person, because if you are what your brain makes you, then drugs literally will make you a different person. You no longer think the same, feel the same, process the same. The things that might have once caused somebody, like for example, if let's say this person loves their child, had it been prior to the addiction, maybe saying something like, look, if you do that, you're going to lose your kid. That might have caused change in that person. But now with addiction changing who you are, that same thing, being like, hey, you can lose your kid, that might not be enough anymore, because you have to realize you are dealing with a different person. So yeah, I mean, that was just pretty much, because we try to keep these videos short, and that's pretty much it. There is, like, we have another video, like I said, the morning video. You should check that out because that does have a little bit more information in there for you guys. And if this is something that interests you, let us know and we can talk about this more in depth, because I do feel like it's really important to understand the brain and addiction, because I think it can really help people understand, either the addict understand themselves more, and understand, I think it can kind of get you out of that point of denial, because you start to understand, like, oh my goodness, like there are some like legitimate things going on. And for the people who are dealing with the person who's addicted, it helps you understand a little bit more why you're seeing some of the changes that you're seeing in the behaviors and so on and so forth. So yeah, like I said, check out that video, check out our morning video, and we'll link that somewhere in this video for you guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow at 1 o'clock on Thursday. Hopefully that Thursday feels like a Thursday, or better yet, the Thursday feels like a Friday. But then again, maybe not, because then it's going to suck that you have to go back to work again like on Friday, so that's a whole mess. Anyway, I will see you guys tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Have a great day.